irreversible. It's almost, when I think of it, like butterflies emerging from their cocoons. These people are finally discovering their identities. Perhaps equally important in my mind to the transformation that is actually happening in the Middle East is the West's perception of this transformation, or the transformation of the West's perception. Unprecedented enthusiasm and enthusiastic admiration has been expressed palpably, not only in official remarks made by leaders around the world, but in the general tone and tenor of reporters and commentators. People's response to what is happening, as the Egyptian novelist Ahdaf Soueif says, is almost personal. Perhaps this is because the uprisings have been organic, not ideological or partisan. It is the people of Egypt, all the people who went out to Tahrir Square, we the people, asking for basic human rights. That in sober and non-violent terms. It's almost like they had learned their lessons from Gandhi and Martin Luther King combined. Why had we hung around so long in the capitals of the Western world, so long with our legs so open? You can see les implications dangereuses. It did no good to tell them we didn't choose the poses, we were painted in. Or that anyway, our sexuality, when we do choose to put it into play, is our own business. Narrow-minded Arab bastards, I'll say it even though they are my brothers, 100 years since we entered these paintings, and they're still stuck in a Neanderthal cave on that whole man-woman thing. So for her, neither Western feminism nor Arab nationalism will do. She is looking for something different. And I think this whole theme that she has represents a little bit the situation that women in the Middle East find themselves in terms of how the West views them and how the East views them on both hands. On the one hand, the status of women differs greatly in different countries of the Islamic world or the Arab world or the Middle East. The struggles ahead of us are determined by largely varying factors. On the other hand, the West's perception and representation of the women in the region impose a thick crust of prejudices that masks the differences and serves certain agendas. It is impossible for a Western conservative, and I specify conservative, to speak of Arab Muslim women without bringing in the odor of Islamophobia. Arab women equals oppression, forced veiling, burqa, and non-being covered in a black tent. And this is one of the predicaments all women in this region share, the predicament of being pre-labeled. Two questions come up in the media over and over again whenever Egyptian women celebrating the revolution are interviewed. I think of two examples that I read recently. One I imagine many of you know, Mona al-Tahawi, and the other is Ahdaf Soueif, the Egyptian writer. The two questions they're always asked is, where are the women? And the second question is, but, what if Islamic extremists take over? To answer the first, the women in Tahrir Square were of all ages and social groups, and their struggle cannot be explained through Orientalist tropes that reduce Arab women to passive victims of culture or religion or Islam. They are active participants in a grassroots struggle against poverty, state corruption, repression, torture, police brutality. They led marches, they attended to the wounded, they participated in identity checks of state-supported thugs. They helped create human shields to protect the Egyptian Antiquity Museum, the Arab League's headquarters, and one another. They have helped organize neighborhood watch groups and committees nationwide in order to protect private and public property. So rather than ask, where are the women, we might ask, as one of my friends has said, why does much of the US public discourse frame the revolution through Islamophobia logics, and why has the corporate media focused mostly on the images of Egyptian men? According to Nadine Naber, Islamophobia fuels popular US discourses on Egypt and drives the question, what if Islamic fundamentalists take over Egypt? It is the strategy by which the US legitimizes its support of violent, oppressive regimes. This question must be understood in terms of an imperial psyche, a state of consciousness that is driven by panic over Islamic fundamentalism and that works as a blocking operation to block progress. Islamophobia thus legitimizes complicity with dictatorship and US empire, representing the Arab woman as nothing more than an abject, invisible being. Islamophobia legitimizes itself through the disappearance of Egyptian women as active agents in the revolution. Maya Mekdashi states, in the contemporary US, it is socially acceptable to vilify Arabs and or Muslims, just as it is okay to be outspokenly racist among this group of people. We have seen the normalization of this racialized discrimination in many instances. So the question of women's role is entangled in a policy of demonizing and racist representation of the entire region. Now, this is interesting because this gets us entangled in the Israeli-Palestinian question. One of the interesting panels, YouTubes that I've seen of Mona Al-Tahawi, she's on a panel with Alan Dershowitz, and it's very, you've seen it, it's quite interesting how he keeps trying to make the point over and over again that the US must understand, and he speaks in these terms, it's very interesting to listen to the rhetoric. The US must understand that it only has one friend in the Middle East. It has only one real friend in the democratic state of Israel. The US must send a message that its support of Israel is constant and paramount and will never change. If you want to be our friend, the US has to tell the Arab states, you may not make Israel unhappy. This message is important, he kept saying. And democracy to him has to be functional, not like, for instance, the democracy of Palestinians that resulted in the Hamas situation. And Mona, of course, becomes absolutely infuriated. And she tells him, how dare you speak of democracy when you oppose the Hamas election, which is absolutely democratic, and seem to resist democracy in your neighboring countries. And so he says, but do you want a democracy that will put you behind veils and behind the burqa? And she says, but that's not what it's about. You are, she says, being an alarmist. And that is the policy. That is the policy of constantly bringing up the boogeyman to stop progress in that region. It is amazing to me that this issue seems to slide by comfortably. If correcting Western stereotypes of the women in the region is one struggle shared by all in the region, other internal struggles are defined by numerous differences among the countries. Egypt might have an easier time forging democratic success, for instance, with its history of organized opposition and an active civil society and institutions that some other countries do not have, where women, for instance, cannot drive. Women in Egypt have always held prominent public roles in the media, in literature, in film, in civil society. Nonetheless, patriarchal laws are still inscribed in the Constitution, and conservative attitudes have steadily seeped into the culture from the Gulf states, where millions of Egyptians have been forced to migrate to look for jobs. The story of Egyptian female power may date back to Nefertiti and Cleopatra, but it is Huda Sha'rawi who was in the forefront of the 1919 revolution against the British, and who in 1923 famously tossed off her veil in public as a symbolic gesture of liberation, who is hailed as the Egyptian feminist. Sha'rawi inspired generations with her fight for women's personal political rights. Wow. Wow. Can I go a couple minutes over? Or shall I cut? Yeah. Okay. After Sha'rawi, we have a number of feminists in the area, in the country. And the most well-known of them is Nawal Saadawi, who is now 79 years old and was present every day during the 18 days at Tahrir Square. Many victories have been won for feminists in Egypt. Women can divorce their husbands, etc., etc. But although the Middle East has come a long way in education, there remains the fact that women are still undereducated and that certain types of education, which is necessary for women and men, like critical thinking, the teaching of liberal arts, are not in the curricula of those countries. The emphasis on science and technology is paramount, and people do not get the kind of education that allows them to think about matters of values and ethics and so on. Therefore, we are left with a fertile ground for fundamentalist ideologies, and we revert to the past to solve the problems of the present. I was going to talk about the newspaper Lara Logan, but I'll skip that and just point out that immediately after the word of the assault broke, right-wing commentators gleefully used it as evidence of how they had been right about Islam, about the dangers posed to the free world by the Egyptian uprising, and how somehow this female reporter got what she deserved, or she should have known better. What all this shows us, and I'm almost done, what all this shows us is that sexual assault of Lara Logan can be attributed to the misogynist culture of Islam, the sexist assault of 1 out of 3 women wearing the US military uniform, because we know this happens in the military, is always only the result of deviant behavior. While rampant domestic violence in the Arab world is due to the devaluation of female life within Arab and Muslim culture, the fact that there are approximately 4.8 million instances of domestic violence a year in the United States says nothing about that society. Yet, while double standards and prejudices seem to distort much of what we perceive, there have been an undeniable wave of respect for the Middle Age, uprisings looking for freedom and dignity. President Obama has expressed to the Egyptian people when he visited his desire for mutual respect between the US and Muslims around the world. I'm going to skip. I just want to say that ultimately the Egyptian revolution is about human rights and about dignity. And the one thing that is really distressing is as the Egyptian activists called for a million woman march on March 8th in Tahrir Square, demanding fair and equal opportunities for all Egyptian citizens beyond gender, religion, or class, yet only several hundred people showed up, and a pro-women demonstration, but included many anti-feminist slogans and people who chanted negative slogans. The women were physically and verbally attacked and eventually went home. Once more, the sad exploitation so common during crises of women as equals in a cause until the goal is reached or the cause is exhausted. Then a return to the good old patriarchal ways. One of the women said, "The bodies of women so often used as ideological battlegrounds have withstood all kinds of police violence, from tear gas to live bullets. The real battleground did not differentiate men from women." We have to find out who did this to stop the pro-women demonstration. We can't let this go on. Men and women fought together during the January 25th revolution. Women have great expectations and rights to be fulfilled. We still have a long way to go.